Moving on then on to sort of the next player on our list and the next player on Manchester United's flanks, and it is a position which is stacked at Old Trafford. There's a real wealth of exciting under 23 players in the wide areas, and one who was signed for quite an eye-watering fee for the experience that he had at the time, and probably still right now, was Amad Diallo, who I think turns 19 this week, but is contracted until 2025 with an additional 1 year option that Manchester United can exercise. So I mean, obviously he's a player who predominantly plays off the right wing. If Sancho goes in at the right wing, then do we see less of Amad? I think that's obviously that's a foregone conclusion. But I think the word that I'd use is that there's no rush essentially for Amad to come good. I'd actually be quite curious to get your thoughts on the fee that was paid. I know it was 20 million initially, and then I think it's 20 million, an additional 20 million in sort of add-ons and additional clauses that will be paid if certain accolades and certain checkpoints are met. But what was your initial reading of that fee? And having had the chance to see him in Man United colours, both for the 23s, where he was it was rude for him playing at that level, as well as at the senior level. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think with regard to the fee, what it really signified to me was that the current people in power at United have sort of identified Carrington as a weak point for the side. There really has been a dearth of top end talent coming out of United's academy since Sir Alex Ferguson left, and I think both the purchase of Diallo and the purchase of Hannibal Mejbri uh, sort of signified a willingness to invest in top end talent that the youth system hadn't otherwise been producing. And so while the fee is astronomical for a player who has essentially no senior football experience, um, I'm pretty happy with it because I think it's a signal of intent, and I think he's a brilliant footballer. So uh, all in all, when you have the kind of money that Man United have to spend, I don't think you can be particularly upset about it.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the revenue that Manchester United generate. I mean, obviously one of, if not the richest club in the world, and so essentially 40 million over the entire period to Manchester United is sort of like a. I mean, it pales into insignificance essentially, which is silly to even consider. But it would be sort of like a 15 million pound move for I don't know, a Crystal Palace or a European, a mid-table European team in a major league. So yeah, I think it's all about swings and roundabouts, I think, essentially. But I did want to gauge your opinion on that. With Ahmad though, he made 8 senior appearances for Manchester United last season after joining from Atalanta. And 3 under 23 games, which he scored 4 goals and got 3 assists, which was, I mean, as I said, it was rude. I think it was a complete piss take, to be honest. I think when he was playing, I think it was against Blackburn. It was a 5-3 game, I think it was, or some very strange scoreline that you often see a little bit more in under 23 football. But yeah, there was a little sequence where he just ran rings around these poor under 23 players. How do you see his pathway, his development continuing for Man United this season? Because obviously with the Sancho addition, that does I wouldn't say it blocks it, but it adds a few complexities to that pathway, I think.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I, I don't have answers to this one in their entirety yet because uh, really my take on it and the way I look at it with Sancho coming in is he really needs a loan because as you said, he has outgrown U23 football to a comedic extent. He really was running rings around people this past year, and I think what he really needs is senior football somewhere, and whether that be, I very much doubt that he's going to get sufficient minutes for United's first team this year, and I'm not sure he's physically in a place where he could handle a loan to the bottom half of the Premier League or even to in particular to the Championship. Um, so I think theoretically, what you should be looking at is a loan somewhere like Portugal or Germany or the Netherlands. But there's no buzz around that at the moment. So obviously we've just begun the window, but it looks to me like he might be staying. And so I don't really know what his role looks like, given that, or whether he's just going to stay with the U23s.
It is a curious one, isn't it? Because, as you say, there's not been any buzz around that, and you'd think that a player who is rated as highly as Amad is, with the news that Sancho is coming in, surely there'll be some sporting directors, scouting heads who are looking at that and thinking, well, this player clearly, as you said, he's outgrown under 23 football. He clearly needs senior games. We've got a pathway for him here. We can, in the short term, we can benefit from getting a year out of him. Maybe he can help us achieve goals that we couldn't previously, because he's an immensely naturally talented player. But I think there's not enough buzz around that. So it'll be interesting to see how the window develops, whether that begins to pick up the pace in the coming weeks and months. But there's also the debate that, it depends who Manchester United managed to offload in the interim period as well, because if Daniel James ends up moving on, whether that be on loan or on a permanent deal, that perhaps Amad could then maybe not fill his minutes, but essentially fill his role in the squad as a backup. I mentioned earlier that he has a contract in effect until 2026, because you'd imagine at some point, as soon as he does kick on, Manchester United will exercise that 1 year extension option. So there's really no urgency to get him minutes on the pitch at the moment. And for a player of his ability, it's very hard to envisage him dropping off so substantially that he then just would not be, he wouldn't be able to rekindle his form, because he is just so talented. I wonder from your perspective, because I don't cover Manchester United every day, but I wonder what your perspective is on sort of how whether Amad could fill Daniel James's minutes.
Yeah, well, we'll see. It's going to be a question of if Daniel James is sold, which there's a little bit of buzz around, and there's sort of always a little bit of buzz around this summer, then yes, I think there's the potential for that. But I also think they're very different players in terms of what you're ultimately looking for them to give the squad. I think Daniel James is this incredibly high work rate defensive winger. I kind of hate that word, or that phrase, but that is what he's become for Solskjaer. He tracks back. He's an incredible presser, and he's actually taken on some sort of impressive movements in the box that he didn't previously have in his game. So there's some slow improvement for a player who's ultimately, I think, a bit piece for a top side. On the other hand, I think Diallo is somebody who's far from the finished product, but is ultimately going to be this brilliant on the ball main man, who very well may wind up with an incredibly high defensive work rate. I think it's a little early to say where he's going to spend his energy at senior level. So I would be a little confused to see James sold and replaced with Diallo. But we'll see. And maybe Solskjaer views him differently, or feels he doesn't need James as much anymore. But yeah, it'll be an interesting squad building issue for United this summer.
Yeah, I think squad building is probably the key word to use in this regard. And unless something has changed in the past few days, which knowing my luck, it probably has, Amad is probably going to miss the beginning of the season, or at least maybe not be involved at the beginning in match day squads at the beginning of the season, because he's been selected in the Côte d'Ivoire's Olympic squad. So there is the potential that he will be playing at the Olympics this summer, which is just another opportunity for him to ball out in front of the masses, albeit not in person, but certainly on TV.